First contact. The Araxian overseer Nexus 7 had never experienced failure in its 300 cycles of existence. Its psychic tendrils had touched the minds of 1,000 species across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy, and each time, victory had been assured before the first shot was fired. The Araxians' telepathic abilities made conventional warfare unnecessary. They simply reached into the collective consciousness of their opponents and inserted the concept of surrender. That was until they found Earth. Impossible. Nexus 7 transmitted to the Hivemind Council. Its crystalline form pulsed with waves of deep crimson, the Araxian equivalent of frustration. The entire species appears to be blank. The council chamber, a vast geometric structure of living crystal suspended in high orbit around the human homeworld, resonated with the combined confusion of 12 overseer minds. Below them, the blue-green pearl of Earth rotated slowly, ignorant of the befuddled alien intelligences scrutinizing it. "Elaborate," commanded first speaker, the eldest of the council. "Their minds are like holes in space. We can detect their presence, but cannot touch their thoughts. It's as if they exist in a different psychic frequency entirely." Nexus 7's report sent ripples of unease through the assembled overseers. The Araxians had encountered psychic resistance before. Some species had natural shields, others had developed technological countermeasures. But total immunity, it defied everything they understood about consciousness in the universe. First speaker's form shifted from its usual pristine white to a troubled amber. "Show us." Nexus 7 projected its recent observations into the shared consciousness of the council. Images flowed. Humans going about their daily lives, their minds completely opaque to Araxian probing. Cities teeming with millions of individuals, each one a blank spot in the psychic landscape. Even their primitive communications, radio waves, digital signals, satellite transmissions, seemed designed to operate without any form of telepathic interface. "How do they coordinate?" asked third speaker, genuinely puzzled. "How do they build civilizations without the binding?" The binding was fundamental to Araxian society, the telepathic network that united their species into a single, efficient organism. The idea of a sophisticated civilization developing without psychic links seemed as impossible as life evolving without carbon. "They use language," Nexus 7 explained, still struggling with the concept. "Verbal and written symbols. They translate thoughts into sequential patterns of sound and light. It's incredibly inefficient, yet they've managed to build a technological civilization with it." "Fascinating," fourth speaker pulsed. "And disturbing." First speaker's crystalline form rotated slowly, refracting starlight in complex patterns that conveyed deep thought to its fellow overseers. "In all our history, we have never encountered a species we could not guide. This presents an unprecedented tactical situation." The unspoken truth hung in the collective consciousness. For the first time in their expansion, the Araxians would have to engage in actual warfare. Their standard protocol of telepathic domination was useless against humanity. "We have observed their military capabilities," Nexus 7 continued. "They are centuries behind us in space travel and weapons technology. Their ships are primitive. Their weapons rely primarily on kinetic and chemical principles. They have barely established colonies beyond their moon. Then we shall defeat them through conventional means," third speaker declared, its confidence radiating through the council chamber. But first speaker pulsed a warning pattern. "Do not underestimate them. Any species that evolved complete psychic immunity must have faced pressures we cannot comprehend. We must assume this immunity serves a purpose beyond frustrating our conquest." As if to underscore first speaker's warning, new information flowed into the collective from the observation arrays. The humans had detected the Araxian ships in orbit. Rather than panic, as most species did when discovering they weren't alone in the universe, the humans were organizing. Military vessels were launching. Communications were intensifying. And still, frustratingly, their minds remained completely closed to Araxian scanning. "They're hailing us," Nexus 7 reported. using electromagnetic waves modulated with their verbal language. Respond. First speaker commanded. Let us see how these individuals communicate. The message was translated through the Araxians' xenolinguistic matrices. Unknown vessels, you have entered Earth-controlled space. Identify yourselves and state your intentions. The directness of it, the complete lack of psychic undertones or emotional context, was jarring to the Araxians. It was like trying to understand a message written in pure mathematics, technically complete, but missing vital dimensions of meaning. First speaker composed a response, trying to adapt to this alien mode of communication. We are the Araxian Empire. Your world now falls under our protection. Resistance is. The transmission was cut off by a new signal, this one from a different human authority. Message received. Response. No. The simplicity of the rejection stunned the council. No species had ever simply said no to the Araxians. The implications were staggering. These humans not only could not be telepathically controlled, they also seemed to lack the very concept of automatic submission to a superior force. They're launching more ships, Nexus 7 reported. Their orbital defense platforms are activating. They're preparing to fight. First speaker's crystalline form pulsed with patterns that hadn't been seen in the council chamber for millennia. Patterns that conveyed uncertainty. Then we shall fight, it declared. Prepare the fleet for conventional warfare. And begin studying their resistance. Perhaps understanding how they block our abilities will help us defeat them. As the council chamber dimmed and the overseers dispersed to prepare for war, none of them recognized the emotion growing in their collective consciousness. It would take them time to identify it, as it was something the Araxians had not experienced in thousands of years. Fear, the silent resistance. The first Araxian assault on Earth was meant to be decisive. It was not. Commander Sarah Chen watched from the bridge of the UEAst, defiant as another crystalline Araxian warship shattered under sustained railgun fire. The alien vessels were technological marvels, translucent geometric shapes that seemed to defy physics, but they had a critical weakness. They were designed for a form of warfare that humans had never developed. They still don't understand, she muttered, watching the tactical display as Earth's combined fleet pressed their advantage. They built their entire civilization around telepathic control. Even their ships are optimized for it. The Araxian vessels were designed to be operated by telepathic consensus, their crews linked into perfect synchronization. But this strength became a weakness when faced with human unpredictability. Each human ship operated independently, their crews making split-second decisions that the Araxians couldn't predict or control. Multiple contacts, bearing 270, her tactical officer reported. They're trying to flank us. Chen smiled. Let them try. Signal the Japanese and Indian squadrons. Execute Pattern Delta. Pattern Delta wasn't in any official military playbook. It had been developed in the 3 months since the Araxians arrived, one of hundreds of improvised tactics that emerged from humanity's desperate resistance. The principle was simple. There was no principle. Each ship commander interpreted Pattern Delta however they chose, creating chaos that the hierarchical Araxian fleet couldn't adapt to. The space around Earth's orbit had become a graveyard of crystalline fragments. The Araxians' first attack had targeted military command centers, expecting to decapitate Earth's leadership. Instead, they found that human military structure was redundant, decentralized, and stubbornly resilient. When they destroyed the Pentagon, operations simply shifted to secondary sites. When they hit those, tertiary commands took over. Message from General Martinez. The comm officer announced. Chinese and Russian fleets report successful counterattacks in sectors 7 and 12. The Araxians are pulling back. Chen nodded. The enemy's retreat wasn't from tactical necessity. Their ships were still far superior to anything Earth could field. No, they were retreating because they were confused, frightened even. They had never encountered an enemy they couldn't simply dominate telepathically, and humanity's resistance didn't follow any pattern they could understand. "Commander," her science officer called out, "I'm detecting unusual energy signatures from the Araxian fleet. They're changing." On the tactical display, the crystalline ships were shifting form, their geometric patterns rearranging into new configurations. The Araxians were adapting, learning from their failures. But so was humanity. "All ships, maintain formation," Chen ordered. "Let's show them what else we've learned about their weaknesses." The past 3 months had been a crash course in xenotechnology. Earth scientists had discovered that the Araxians' crystalline technology, while incredibly advanced, was susceptible to certain frequencies of electromagnetic radiation. Their ships' perfect structures could be disrupted by precisely calibrated energy pulses. "Launch the EM pods," Chen commanded. Across Earth's defensive line, small pods were deployed from human ships. The Araxians ignored them at first. They were too small to be weapons, too slow to be missiles. That was their mistake. The pods activated simultaneously, creating a web of electromagnetic pulses that played havoc with the aliens' crystalline systems. Direct hit. Their formation is breaking up. The Araxian ships began to move erratically as their telepathic coordination was disrupted. Without their perfect synchronization, they were like organs separated from a body, still powerful, but unable to function as a unified whole. Chen opened a channel to all Earth forces. "All ships, engage at will. Remember, they expect us to follow tactical doctrines. Don't give them patterns to analyze. Fight as individuals." The battle that followed would later be called the First Victory, though it was really more of a stalemate. The Araxians retreated not because they were defeated, but because they had encountered something that threatened their fundamental understanding of warfare: chaos as a strategy. In the aftermath, as Earth's fleets regrouped and recovered, Chen received a transmission from the newly formed United Earth Defense Council. The Araxians had sent a message, not a demand for surrender this time, but a question. How do you coordinate without the binding? How do you achieve unity without synchronicity? The Council's response was brief. "We don't. That's our strength." In her quarters that night, Chen reviewed the battle footage. The Araxian ships moved with perfect geometry, each maneuver calculated and precise. Earth's ships, in contrast, moved like a swarm of angry wasps, seemingly random, yet devastatingly effective. "They think we're primitive because we don't share a hive mind," she told her assembled officers. "But they don't understand that our individuality, our unpredictability, evolved for a reason. Earth's history is written in chaos and adaptation. We don't need telepathy to work together. We learn to cooperate while maintaining our independence." As she spoke, reports were coming in from around the solar system. The Araxians were regrouping, but something was different. Their usually perfect formations showed slight irregularities. Their responses to human movements were becoming less synchronized. "They're trying to understand us," her intelligence officer noted. "But in doing so, they're starting to question their own nature." Chen nodded. "Then let's give them more to think about. Begin Operation Mindbreaker. It's time to show them that our immunity to their telepathy isn't just defensive. It can be a weapon." Operation Mindbreaker. Dr. Maya Patel hadn't slept in 48 hours, but she couldn't stop staring at the readings on her lab's quantum resonance scanner. What had started as a defensive research project to understand humanity's psychic immunity had led to a discovery that could change the course of the war. "Show me the simulation again," she told her eye assistant. The holographic display came to life, showing the interaction between human brainwave patterns and Araxian telepathic fields. Where the alien psychic energy touched human consciousness, it didn't just stop. It reflected back, amplified, and distorted. "We're not just immune," she whispered. "We're mirrors." The revelation had come from studying captured Araxian crystals. Their technology was based on telepathic resonance, using crystalline structures to amplify and direct psychic energy. But when exposed to human brainwave patterns, the crystals began to exhibit unusual behaviors. They didn't just fail to function. They started generating feedback loops. The door to her lab slid open, admitting Commander Chen and a group of military officials. "Please tell me you have something," Chen said. "The Araxians are adapting to our electromagnetic countermeasures." Patel nodded, gesturing to her displays. "Better than that. We've discovered why they can't read our minds and how to use it against them." She brought up a new simulation, showing the structure of an Araxian crystal ship. Their entire civilization is built on telepathic consensus. Their ships, their weapons, even their basic technology all require telepathic coordination to function. But human consciousness exists on a different quantum frequency. When our brainwaves interact with their psychic fields, we create destructive interference patterns. In English, Doctor, one of the generals requested, "We're not just blocking their telepathy, we're reflecting it back at them, scrambled and amplified. And now we know how to enhance that effect." The prototype sat on her workbench, a small crystal matrix reverse-engineered from Araxian technology, but modified to resonate with human brainwave patterns. When activated, it would take humanity's natural psychic reflection and turn it into a weapon. "The Araxians operate as a unified consciousness," Patel explained. "But that unity requires perfect synchronization. If we can inject enough interference into their network, we can break their connection," Chen finished. "Turn their greatest strength into a weakness." The implementation of Operation Mindbreaker began 2 weeks later. Earth's ships were equipped with modified crystals that amplified their crew's natural psychic resistance. The effect was more devastating than anyone had predicted. The first battle using the new technology lasted less than an hour. As human ships approached the Araxian fleet, their enhanced psychic reflection created waves of interference in the aliens' telepathic network. The perfect geometric formations of crystalline ships began to wobble and drift as their crews experienced something they had never known: mental static. "They're breaking formation," Chen reported from the bridge of the Defiant. "Their coordination is failing." The Araxian ships, designed to function as parts of a greater whole, suddenly found themselves struggling with individuality. Their crews, linked since birth into the collective consciousness of their species, were experiencing mental isolation for the first time. But the true impact went far beyond tactical advantages. The psychic feedback was affecting the Araxians on a deeper level. Their perfectly ordered thoughts were being disrupted by echoes of human consciousness, chaotic, individual, free. "We're receiving transmissions from multiple Araxian vessels," her communications officer reported. "They're different, fragmented. Some ships are requesting individual surrender." Individual surrender. The concept was revolutionary in Araxian society, where all decisions were made by consensus. The very idea of a single ship acting independently of the fleet was unthinkable, until now. The Araxian Overseer Council, monitoring the battle from their command nexus, experienced something unprecedented, dissent within their own ranks. The human psychic reflection was creating cracks in their unified consciousness, allowing individual thoughts and doubts to emerge. "The warriors of the Third Fleet are questioning," Nexus 7 reported, its crystalline form flickering with distress. "They're beginning to think separately." First speaker's response carried undertones of fear. "Impossible. The binding cannot be broken." But it was breaking. The humans hadn't just found a way to fight the Araxians. They had found a way to change them. Each exposure to the enhanced psychic reflection pushed the aliens further from their collective consciousness and closer to individual awareness. Dr. Patel, monitoring the effects from her lab, realized the implications went far beyond military victory. "We're not just winning the war," she told Chen during a brief respite between battles. "We're forcing them to evolve. Every time they encounter our psychic reflection, their minds become more individual." "Is that what we want?" Chen asked. "To fundamentally change their species." Patel's response was interrupted by a new alert. The Araxian fleet was withdrawing, but not in their usual perfect formation. Ships were leaving in small groups, some breaking off entirely from the main force. And then came the transmission that would change everything. A message not from the Araxian Council, but from a single Araxian ship. We wish to understand how to be separate. Teach us. The hive and the individual. The Araxian Empire was experiencing its first civil war, though civil war wasn't quite the right term. How could there be civil war in a species that had never known internal conflict? Yet here it was. Crystalline ships firing upon their own kind. Perfect formations shattering as individual vessels chose different paths. From the observation deck of humanity's new diplomatic station, Commander Chen watched the Araxian crisis unfold. Next to her stood Nexus 7, no longer connected to the Overseer Council, its crystalline form pulsing with colors that had no name in human language. "How do you bear it?" Nexus 7 asked, its translated voice carrying unfamiliar emotional undertones. "The silence in your minds, the weight of being alone." "We're not alone," Chen replied. "We choose to connect with others. But we choose when, and how, and with whom. That's what freedom means." The station had become a sanctuary for what humans called the awakened, Araxians who had developed individual consciousness after exposure to human psychic reflection. They came seeking understanding of their new state of being, trying to reconcile their species' collective nature with their emerging sense of self. Dr. Patel had set up a research center on the station, studying the transformation. "It's fascinating," she explained during a briefing. "Their crystalline biology is actually restructuring itself. The networks that once maintained their telepathic consensus are becoming more flexible, more individual. But not all Araxians welcome this change. The Overseer Council, what remained of it, had declared the awakened corrupted and ordered their destruction. The Empire's vast fleet had split, some ships remaining loyal to the collective, others protecting their newly individual kindred. Another group requesting sanctuary. The station's tactical officer reported. 3 ships, approximately 2,000 Araxians aboard. They're being pursued by Council loyalists. Chen straightened. "Launch defensive screen. Notify our awakened allies to prepare for reception." The human fleet had taken on a new role, protecting Araxian refugees from their own kind. Earth's ships moved to intercept the pursuing loyalists, their psychic reflection technology now refined to the point where they could selectively target hostile vessels while allowing friendly ones to pass. In the station's meditation chamber, designed to help awakened Araxians cope with their new consciousness, a young crystal being who called itself First Question spoke to a human counselor. "Before, we were many as one," it said, its form shifting with uncertainty. "Now we are one as one, but also one among many. The patterns, they do not resolve." "They're not supposed to," the counselor replied. "That's what being individual means. You find your own patterns." The crisis had revealed something unexpected about Araxian biology. Their telepathic consensus hadn't just been a cultural choice. It had been an evolutionary dead end. Their species had become so dependent on collective consciousness that they had stopped adapting, stopped evolving. Contact with humanity had shattered that stasis. The psychic reflection had awakened dormant neural pathways, triggering a cascade of biological and psychological changes. The Araxians were evolving again, but this time toward something new, a balance between collective harmony and individual identity. Nexus 7, who had become something of an ambassador between the two species, composed a message for the remaining council. "We have discovered that unity does not require uniformity. The humans have shown us that strength can come from difference, that harmony can arise from discord. Our species stands at a crossroads. We can cling to the perfection of our past, or we can embrace the chaos of growth." The response from the council was predictable. "You speak with one voice instead of many. You are no longer Araxian." But even as they transmitted these words, More ships broke formation. More crystals began to pulse with individual colors. The change, once started, could not be stopped. In her lab, Dr. Patel made another discovery. The awakened aren't just developing individual consciousness, she reported. They're developing something new, a form of voluntary telepathic linking. They can choose when to connect and when to remain separate. Chen watched as a group of awakened demonstrated this new ability. Their crystalline forms resonated together, sharing thoughts and feelings, then separated again, maintaining their individual identities. It was neither the old complete consensus nor human-style total separation, but something in between, a new way of being. We are becoming something else, Nexus 7 observed. Neither what we were nor what you are, but something new. That's evolution, Chen replied. That's growth. As if to underscore her words, another alert sounded. More ships breaking away from the Council's fleet, more Araxians choosing the uncertain path of individuality over the familiar comfort of the collective. The war wasn't over, but it had changed beyond recognition. It was no longer about conquest or resistance, but about the very nature of consciousness and society. Humanity had not just defended itself, it had inadvertently sparked a revolution in what it meant to be Araxian. Evolution's children. 1 year after the first Araxian ship requested sanctuary, the crystalline spires of New Harmony rose from the surface of Mars. It was the first joint human-Araxian settlement, a place where both species could study and learn from each other. The crystal towers pulsed with shifting colors, no longer the uniform patterns of the old empire, but a vibrant dance of individual expressions coming together in voluntary harmony. Commander Chen, recently promoted to admiral, stood in the settlement's central chamber alongside Dr. Patel and Nexus 7. Through the transparent walls, they could see Earth hanging in the distance, a blue jewel in the black sky. The Council has requested negotiations, Nexus 7 announced, its crystalline form displaying patterns that would have been considered chaotic by old Araxian standards. Not as superior beings demanding surrender, but as equals seeking understanding. The remnants of the Araxian Empire had been forced to evolve. With nearly 40% of their population now awakened to individual consciousness, they could no longer maintain the rigid hierarchy of pure collective thought. The Council itself had begun to change, incorporating new patterns of organization that allowed for individual variation within their collective decision-making. Dr. Patel's research had revealed why humanity's psychic immunity had evolved. Our ancestors faced their own version of the binding, she explained to a group of awakened Araxians, not from external telepathy, but from social pressure to conform. Those who maintained their individual thinking, while still cooperating with others, passed on those traits. We evolved to be resistant to mental domination, while remaining capable of working together. The awakened had developed their own unique culture, neither purely individual like humans, nor purely collective like traditional Araxians. They had learned to shift between states of consciousness, forming temporary mental links for cooperation while maintaining their distinct identities. Watch, Nexus 7 said, gesturing to a group of awakened working on expanding the settlement. The crystalline beings merged their consciousness to coordinate the lifting of a massive structural component, their forms resonating in perfect synchronization. But unlike the old Araxian unity, this was temporary and voluntary. As soon as the task was complete, they separated again, each maintaining their unique patterns. We are learning what your species discovered long ago, Nexus 7 continued. That true strength comes not from enforced unity, but from the willing cooperation of diverse individuals. The transformation hadn't been without cost. Some Araxians couldn't adapt to individual consciousness, their crystalline structures shattering under the stress of separation. Others clung desperately to the old ways, retreating to isolated colonies where they could maintain their collective existence. But for the majority, there was no going back. They had tasted individual thought, and like a crystal that had found a new pattern of growth, they could not return to their original form. The question remains, Admiral Chen said, reviewing reports from across the solar system. What happens next? Your species is changing, but so is ours. We're learning from each other. She was right. Human scientists studying Araxian technology had begun to understand the principles behind their telepathic abilities. While humans would never develop the same kind of collective consciousness, they were learning to appreciate the benefits of closer mental cooperation. New technologies were emerging that allowed for limited, controlled sharing of thoughts and emotions, always voluntary, always individual, but opening new possibilities for human connection. The Araxian Empire was transforming into something new, a federation of semi-independent collectives, each finding its own balance between unity and individuality. The awakened had become teachers and mediators, helping their traditional kindred adapt to a universe where absolute consensus was no longer possible or desirable. We thought we came to conquer. Nexus 7 reflected, its colors shifting to deep blues of contemplation. Instead, we found the next step in our evolution. You taught us that adaptation requires variation, that strength comes from diversity, that true unity can only come from free choice. Dr. Patel's latest research had shown something remarkable. The new Araxian biology was more resilient, more adaptable than the old. By incorporating individual variation, they had broken free from their evolutionary stasis. They were changing, growing, becoming something the universe had never seen before. Perhaps that's the real victory, Admiral Chen suggested. Not that either of our species conquered the other, but that both of us found a way to become more than we were. As if in response, a new alert came through. Another group of traditional Araxians requesting guidance and awakening to individual consciousness. But this time, it wasn't human ships that moved to assist them. A fleet of awakened vessels, their crystalline forms pulsing with unique patterns while maintaining perfect coordination, departed from Mars to welcome their transforming kindred. The war that had begun with an attempt at conquest had ended in neither victory nor defeat, but in evolution. Humanity had defended itself not by destroying its enemy, but by showing them a new way to exist. The Araxians had sought to impose unity and found instead the strength of diversity. In the chambers of new harmony, human and Araxian children were already learning together, each bringing their own unique perspectives to understanding the universe. They would grow up knowing something their ancestors had not, that the greatest adventures come not from conquering differences, but from embracing them. Nexus 7, watching the next generation of both species, displayed colors that no translation matrix could fully capture. The joy of being both individual and connected, the excitement of continuous growth, the wonder of becoming something new. We are all, it said, evolution's children.